Hello, everyone, and welcome to MedAd Views, the MedAd News podcast series. I'm Joshua Slatko, host of the podcast and contributing editor for MedAd News. Our guest today is Deborah Pan Dorner, co-founder and chief creative officer of Bond and Matter. Deb has a BS in chemistry from MIT and a master's from Johns Hopkins. Her career has spanned across the full pharma life cycle, beginning with her role in the lab as a medicinal chemist at Merck, literally making drugs. Today, she focuses on the balance of science and creativity in healthcare communications, specializing in promotional medical communications and AOR advertising for HCPs and consumers. We spoke with her about her journey to launching an independent agency, the importance of mentorship, and being a female in a leadership role. There's always been a wide variety of backgrounds in healthcare communications, but I'm curious how many hold degrees in chemistry from MIT and biotech from Johns Hopkins. How did you come to those two places, and how did they lead you to where you are now?
I might edit that a bit. I think there are probably a lot of people in the pharma side and maybe even the pharma agency side who have those kinds of degrees, but they might be researchers, medical writers, clinical people. I think maybe for a creative agency founder, it might be quite rare. I don't know if I've met anyone who has that specific kind of background. And I like to say I started my career making drugs. I was a medicinal chemist at Merck, literally in the lab, making drugs like Breaking Bad style. And now I'm in charge of selling them. So I've done both sides of that coin. But how did I get there? I like to give both the blame and the credit to my parents. I guess I'm a child of immigrants. My mom is from Japan, my dad is from Taiwan, and my dad in particular was very much focused on math and science growing up, while I kind of secretly always had this penchant for writing. Like, I think in my dream world, I would be a creative writer. I'd write novels or fiction, back then. And I had a lot of writing that I did sort of secretly in my diary, at night. But those two worlds, like, I couldn't see a way in which they would collide, at that time, being 8 or 10 or even 18. So I followed in my older sister's footsteps and went to MIT. And there, the choices of what you can major in are somewhat limited, I think, by nature, because it's such a selective school that focuses on math, science, and engineering. So I chose chemistry, which was something I was really interested in high school. And it was great until I took a job at Merck and realized that maybe standing in the lab for 10 or 12 hours a day with goggles and a lab coat and in kind of isolation was not for me. So I had to find something else. Later on, I realized that maybe there was a way to marry up the science lab aspect, like the discovery aspect of what I did, and my love for writing and creativity and being able to communicate the science more so than actually doing it. And I fell into the agency world, and the rest is kind of history, I guess.
How would you say the agency you've created, the agency you've founded, reflects your background?
That's a really great question. I think that the agency that we have created, starting from, the type of people that we hired and the name itself and the ethos and kind of founding tenets upon which we created it, are really, really tied up in who I am as a person and a leader. We call the agency Bond and Matter because we wanted it to have its roots both in science, with the word bond and the word matter having deep roots in science, physics, and chemistry. But also those two words have a relationship meaning, a sort of a meaning that can be more understandable by the layperson as well as the scientist. So we wanted each word to have kind of a duality to it. And that wordplay and that kind of creativity in coming up with that name reflects, I think, who we are as a company and who I am, that push and pull that I've always had between loving science and being really good at it, but then also knowing that there was a part of me, the 8-year-old girl that used to write stories, in the evening when my parents thought that I was doing homework in my room. That kind of push and pull, I was able to find a way, I think, with this creating this company to be able to embrace both. And that's, I think, part and parcel of the kind of people that we've hired. We've hired a lot of pharmacists and PhDs, people who have a strong ability and to understand and to communicate science, but who didn't necessarily want to be scientists themselves, who didn't necessarily want to be in the lab or standing behind the counter at a retail pharmacy or in a hospital pharmacy. They wanted to do something else and be able to bond with people, connect with people at the same time.
We're currently celebrating International Women's Month here in the United States. As a founder of an agency, what unique challenges do you feel you've faced as a woman and as a child of immigrants?
I think because of the career path I took, coming from pharma, working as a bench scientist, and then working my way up as a medical writer, and then in account and strategy, I didn't come up the usual way for an agency founder. So that, I think, posed some challenges. But the major thing for me is I think I was a little bit blinded in a good way by my own determination and sort of tunnel vision. Like I didn't think that failure was really an option for me. I'm a daughter of immigrants, like I said. My co-founder and business partner, Sid Gokhale, is an immigrant from India. And I think, we were just kind of driven by our own determination to succeed and make it work. We had worked in an agency previously together, which we had, at which we had run many launches, especially for vaccine products. So we had been experienced in kind of doing that, but working for somebody else. And I think we always thought that it would be great if we could start something ourselves that would be sort of what we wanted it to be, and to hire the kind of people and to have the kind of company morale and vision and execution the way we wanted it to be. So maybe it was, people say that, when you start a company, you're driven either by like sheer genius or kind of dumb luck. And in our case, maybe it was a little bit of both. I think that, my family would say, you didn't seem to have any hesitation or any kind of qualms. You're just like, I'm going to quit my job, in which, I'm pretty senior at a mid-size agency and doing well and making very decent money. And I had a baby at the time. And, COVID was right around the corner. And when we founded it, it was actually after COVID had started. So everything was locked down. And only maybe crazy people or people who are blinded by some kind of tunnel vision would say, this is a perfect time to quit my job and start an agency. As a woman, I would say that I did face some challenges, I think, especially when working in a bigger company, that, especially as a younger woman working in a bigger company, was part of the impetus, honestly, to quit. I think that starting an agency might have been secondary. The first thing is I knew that I needed to get out of an environment in which I didn't necessarily feel like I had the right mentors. I didn't feel like, I think that, sometimes younger women can be, especially in advertising, especially sometimes in the type of advertising we do, whether you're a creative or account person or strategist, and I've played all of those roles, as well as medical in my agency career, but sometimes can be overlooked, and sometimes our voices can be drowned out. And I've felt many times while working at a bigger agency, or even sometimes being at client meetings at those agencies, when I had an important point or I wanted to stretch out of my comfort zone, if I were the account strategist, but I wanted to make a point on medical because that is kind of my background, or I wanted to come up with, I thought I had a great idea for the winning headline. I think that sometimes those ideas would get squashed. And one of the most important things for me and my partner, Sid, was to create an agency where those lines are a little bit blurred, where women, especially young women, didn't feel that just because they were a pharmacist by training that they couldn't contribute to the creative, that they couldn't have an idea about what the art should look like, that they wouldn't be great in a client meeting. They should stay behind the scenes and do medical writing or kind of focus on the research, because that's, I think, not who I am. And I didn't want to stifle anyone by putting them in that kind of a silo. So part of the impetus behind starting Bond and Matter was to create a safe space for people like me who may have been a little bit not followed a straight and narrow path. I think people could look at my background from MIT and Hopkins and say, okay, I understand that medical writer or I understand that she's going to be one day like head of medical at an agency. I don't think in my wildest dreams or in the wildest dreams of my mentors in the past, they would have said chief creative officer and co-founder of a creative agency. That would be nowhere in my or their vision for what I was going to do. But once I started doing it, I think the vision became clear that it's what I was meant to do. Because I think from a young age, I really felt that push and pull between science and creative. And this feels like the culmination of that.
Now that you've been through the experience of founding and growing an agency, if you could go back in time and give yourself a piece of advice, give 10 years ago yourself a piece of advice,
Hmm.
what would it be?
I think 10 years ago, let's see, I was 34. I was working in the larger agency, kind of fighting those battles of wanting to prove myself, wanting to be good enough. I think there was probably a bit of imposter syndrome that we all have, but especially women. I think I would tell myself what I should have told myself when I was, 26 and 18 and even 8, and what I hope that I'll be able to instill in my daughter, that all the different sides of and facets that make up who you are, all your different strengths are one day going to be extremely useful in what you end up doing and your future success. But even though it doesn't seem like it right now. So at that time, I was leading a very large account, marketing a suite of vaccines, flu vaccines. But I was on the account side and I was running, the account along with many other people on the team. And I feel like I would sometimes try to stifle my creativity or stifle, what I thought was right and true because I had gotten my wrist slapped so many times for trying to break out of the mold. What I didn't realize that 10 years into the future, that the ability to kind of understand the client dynamic, to understand the science at a deep level, to be creative and be able to see things kind of at that lens, all of those things together, all of those facets of who I am would make me successful. And so I would tell younger women that, don't try to hide certain parts of you to fit into the mold of what, your bosses or society is expecting. I would also tell them that although it seems really difficult at the time, and I don't believe in this, everyone can have it all kind of mentality, but I do believe there is a way to satisfy both your need to kind of succeed in the career and to have a fulfilling family life. Because I think that it is possible. As a female founder who started a business during COVID with a very young child and a family, I think that it's not always easy and it can sometimes be messy and sometimes you need some help. That it is possible to kind of find spaces for everything and not feel like everything has to be done at the same time, but to carve out those spaces where you can be sort of a great mom as well as a great leader. And that's not something I feel like I really got a lot of great mentorship on or had a lot of great role models in the industry. I think that sometimes people look at female agency leaders and agency founders and have the stereotype, at least back then, women who are older than us, our generation above us. And it didn't seem very doable to be able to manage motherhood and being at the top of your game on the agency side. And I think what I would like to tell the young women on my team and who may be listening and our daughters, right, the next generation, is that I think that the world is a different place now. I think with the flexibility of remote work, people being a lot more understanding that you might need to take time out in a given week to do this or that, to be there for your kids. There's a lot more understanding than when I first started working.
You've mentioned the word mentor a few times. How do you think healthcare communications agencies can do a better job of mentoring employees?
I think it's a great question. I think that, especially in the agency world, it's so fast paced and we're always trying to get the right thing done for the client at the right time that sometimes mentorship goes by the wayside. I really think that young people, male and female, need more direct access to leaders And I think in the larger agencies and maybe larger pharma companies, that doesn't always happen. Those people may be several layers above them and busy, with other kinds of tasks that they don't necessarily get a chance to connect with the up and coming talent. At a smaller agency like ours, I think by nature of who we are and that we don't have the luxury of having several layers that our junior employees are interacting with me directly on a day-to-day basis, looking at work, kind of talking about client situations, figuring out how to handle being in the tough spot and also, pitching and wins and everything. I think that they learn by example. And my hope is that in larger firms as well as large pharma companies, younger people get the opportunity to kind of work side by side in some fashion with senior leaders, because that's the only way you really learn. I think having one-on-ones with people once in a while can work, but there's nothing like working side by side or on Teams or on Zoom, trying to solve a problem in a real world situation that helps younger people learn by doing. My dad was a great kind of inspiration to me growing up. He was an electrical nuclear engineer, and he taught me everything I know about math and science from a young age. And I think he is a real impetus and a reason why my sister and I both attended MIT. Like, the creativity and spark that he put in us, and wonder about science really kind of led us there. But one thing he would do is lead by show us and explain how to do things by example and by doing, not necessarily just by rote memorization. So MIT interviewed me last summer, and they kind of shared an example of when my dad was explaining this principle by Archimedes, and he filled up a bathtub all the way with water. And we started throwing things in to understand water displacement. And so there was water going everywhere. But, that's something that's super memorable. If you're not really that interested in science, I think that any kid would be interested to throw giant objects in a tub that's brimming with water to see what will happen. We did a lot of things like that. And I think that that's sort of the approach that I take when mentoring younger people at my company too. I bring them in on what the client situation is, even if, ordinarily someone who was 1 year out of school wouldn't be sort of under the hood of some of the drama that can happen between client agency relationships. I think it's important that, people at all levels, within reason, understand what some of the issues are, so we can kind of work together to problem solve how to tackle it. So if there's a timing issue or, God forbid, a quality issue, which doesn't happen very often in our agency, but or a personality mismatch, or there's something happening on the client end that's out of our control, but we can kind of figure out a way to mitigate the problem on our end and make it easier for them. We try to bring our folks in to kind of help us problem solve. And I think that jumping right in, whether it's to the bathtub or to problems like this, it's the best way to kind of figure out together how to work that problem solving muscle.
There is and there always will be a tension in healthcare communications between, on one side, science and data and regulations and structure, and then on the other side, the idea of creativity and craft and drawing and painting and creating arresting, interesting pictures and stories. I'm curious how you strike that balance at Bond and Matter, how you keep that idea of craft and creativity alive, how you make space for that in an industry that is often so focused on what's on the other side of the fence.
I think that's something that every agency kind of wrestles with, and every agency has its own take on that. Here at Bond and Matter, we do a lot of what we call HCP promotion, so promotion direct to healthcare professional. In that sense, and maybe especially because of who we are and the type of clients that are hiring us are looking for people who are going to understand high science. So we do work a lot in the infectious disease and vaccine space and the rare disease space. We find that our communications tend to have a real emphasis on the clear, concise communication of the science, but we want to do it in a really beautiful way. And we want to do it in a way that I think will grab the audience's attention, both in terms of the copy and the art, right? That's the goal. So I think that what we really challenge ourselves to do is to make the science sing in a way that will make the viewer stop. So whether that's a really beautiful MOA type image, whether that's a headline that's a little bit cheeky, or a double entendre is my favorite thing. As you can tell by the name of our company, right? We love wordplay. So as a writer myself, I think I'm really focused on the words. We have a really wonderful art team that I think can visualize things in a way that can be, science is really beautiful, right? And I think there's a way to kind of depict that. And when you bring the cleverness of the words and the impact of the data together with art that's really visually stimulating and arresting, is where you get a concept for physician in particular that will make them stop. I think sometimes for physicians, one thing that we need to understand, that I've learned in the industry is, yes, the concept matters, the creative matters to a point, but they're looking to understand the data. They're looking to understand, kind of what does this drug or vaccine do? And so when we get too complicated with having the most creative idea, the most outlandish idea, or, the idea that you think is going to be in the billboard, or win some kind of massive creative award, it's not necessarily the concept that resonates with physicians the most in market research or in real life. So we do wrestle with that line as well. And I think at Pond and Matter, we're not necessarily looking for the most kind of out there, outlandish, award-winning creative. I think we're really focused on, like, what is the creative that's going to win the hearts and minds of the physician or the nurse and really help them understand very quickly what's the main benefit of this drug over others or over the placebo. And we try to do that in a way that will be attention grabbing and memorable.
In your agency's profile in MedEd News' April issue upcoming, you mentioned that one of your founding tenets is to pass good fortune forward to those in need. Why is that an important philosophy for you in the agency, and how have you executed on that philosophy?
It's one of my favorite topics, I think, because I think for both me and my co-founder, Sid, like I mentioned before, neither of us come from this world. Neither of us expected that we would be business owners and entrepreneurs. And I think it's, we've had really good fortune and success doing this in a short period of time. And I think that it's been both exhilarating, but a little bit overwhelming and humbling in a way. I think that because of how we grew up, and I think because of the, we are kind of, we hold those immigrant values. We understand that I think success is not, it's meant to be shared. And it's not necessarily for one person or one family to kind of to hoard, or, it's meant to be shared with the community. And I think that that's kind of why Bond and Matter places a big emphasis on giving back. So each year we go to a location. Usually it's been in the South because we do it over Martin Luther King Day weekend, and it's cold and snowy in the Northeast where many of us live. And we will go and we will make a weekend of service. It's an opportunity for a company, which is a virtual agency, to get together in person. And it's really fun to see all the young people in our company get together, go out, have some time kind of with each other, but not doing work, to really get to know each other on a deeper level. And it's really wonderful to see the bonds that they've built kind of on the screen manifest in real life. But we do make it a point to kind of foster that company value of giving back and altruism, because we feel like we've been really lucky. It's been a lot of hard work for sure, but luck is involved. And so when it comes to giving back, we choose a charity that is meaningful to us, that we can do something that we can kind of hands-on together. Usually it has a creative bend. And it's a really great time for us to bond too as teammates. separately, we have done some pro bono work, as you may have read in the profile from this year or last year. And I personally like to give back to the school system in helping out with some of my daughter's activities, particularly in the areas of gifted and talented education and STEM education, which are both areas that I've benefited from and my daughter's benefiting from, as we're both products of the American public school system.
How do you encourage folks who come from that MIT, Johns Hopkins background to express their innate creativity, something they may have not expected that they were going to be doing?
It's true what you said. Like there's this inherent bias that people think like these are going to be the people in the lab, or these are the people like making the drugs, and these are the people who are going to be, creating the logos and creating the messaging and creating the advertisements about them. And I think many people think that like never the twain shall meet, like these are two completely disparate sets of people. And they don't have to be. And I think in the best agencies that do the best work, sometimes they are the same people. And so what I mean by that is we try to hire people who have this kind of ethos and mentality that just because you're a scientist doesn't mean that you can't be creative. Because in fact, I think one of the quote on our website is by Albert Einstein, because it's one of my favorite quotes, and has been since I was a little girl. The greatest scientists are artists as well. So it's something Einstein said. And I think to be a really great scientist, to be able to envision the world differently, to see beyond what's right in front of you, to be able to envision kind of all the possibilities, you have to be creative. You have to be able, in the same way that an artist can envision something that wasn't there before and then he creates it, a great scientist or someone who can understand science at a deep level has to be able to see beyond sort of the everyday and to envision a possibility outside of that. And I think there's so many things, I've written about this before, I think there's so many things in nature that are inherently works of art, right? The human body, just at a deeper microscopic level, when you look at cells, they're so, it does look a little bit like abstract art sometimes. And there's like beauty and wonder in that I think that a lot of the folks on my team embody. I think they're scientists at heart who also want to understand and explain science in a really beautiful and compelling way. And so when we hire folks, we put in the job description, actually, we've kind of coined it creative scientists. We didn't really trademark it or anything, but we want people who view themselves as more than just a pharmacist or a chemist or a biologist. We want people who view themselves as people who can think beyond that in an abstract way, because I think that that's really helped us get some of our best thinking for our clients out. Like, I think when we can think beyond this pill does this, or this vaccine protects against that, and get to the deeper human emotion behind that, it takes a little bit of a scientist and an artist to do that.
I'm also a parent of young children, and so I'm curious, how do you explain to your daughter what it is you do every day?
Well, she kind of grew up with it. I think we were shooting a TV commercial for a vaccine. This is when we worked at a larger agency when she was 2. And I was, kind of noodling on the headline over and over again. And I was saying it. And I have videos of like some of her first sentences that she strung together were the lines from that commercial shoot. She's very much interested, I think, as I think that maybe most kids are. I'm not sure because I only have one child, but she's very, very interested in what I do. And I hope that she'll listen to this and one day kind of think, like, wow, it's really cool what my mom does. I think we all want our kids to kind of be inspired by what gets us out of bed every morning. How do we explain it? I think she understands it as there are doctors who need to learn about new medicines and new vaccines, and my mom and her company and companies like hers teach them more about what these drugs and vaccines do, but they need to do it in a way that's going to grab the person's attention, so in an eye-catching way or in a memorable way. And I find her watching drug ads on TV, that pop up on Hulu or Netflix. And I find her saying like, I like that tagline, or I like that creative. And it's funny because I think kids are so easily influenced, I think in a positive way by what we do sometimes. And if we can get them interested and excited about it, it's a really cool thing. I will say, and I will not reveal which clients, but she, and I didn't pay her for it, but she has written a couple of lines, headlines and taglines that I've sold to my clients, and you know, it makes her really proud. But
She doesn't get her own hourly rate.
she does not, but she gets paid in food, love, yarn. She's really into crochet, books, and music lessons.
Historically, it has been difficult for working parents, especially working mothers, as they juggle many roles and responsibilities to climb the ladder. Do you think this is an outdated perception? And how do you feel you've challenged it?
I think that there was always that old trope when I was younger, like 20s and early 30s in the industry, that you could be, a female leader at the top of your game, whether it's, on the industry side or on the agency side, or you could be like a really dedicated, devoted mother and be involved in all aspects of your child's life and be at the games and the concerts and all of that. But it would be very difficult or nearly impossible to do both. That was always kind of in the back of my mind because that's what we kind of heard and what we saw. But it's been, 15, 20 years since then. COVID has happened. The world has kind of changed how we look at remote work and doing things from home. And I do think it has changed. I think that, I'm not 100% sure on the industry side because, that I haven't been in the industry since I worked at Merck more than 20 years ago. But on the agency side, I think it has changed a little bit and for the better. I remember a time, must have been 2015 or 2014. So we're talking, 12 or 13 years ago, when the whole agency or the whole team that was working on a product launch would have to sit there and wait for things to route to you, for the art to be done, and then that to route back to account and then route back to editorial. And all these things that could theoretically have been done online or via email or via, a project management system to track it would require the entire team to be in the office till 11, 12, midnight, 1 a.m. That makes it really hard to be a working mom. I think that the technology and sort of circumstances behind COVID have, it really was terrible at the time, but paradoxically have made it more accessible for more women to kind of embrace hybrid work or remote work. And even for those who work in the large agency setting that need to go in 3, 4, or 5 days a week, I think there's just more inherent flexibility now that people understand that during COVID, we did everything remotely, 100%. And jobs still got routed and products still launched for the most part on time. So if we were able to do that, I think there was a real shakeup in the agency world to say, we don't have to always be sitting huddled together in order to, get this one flashcard through approval into submission, right? There's ways to do it. And that I think has been a real boon for working mothers and working female leaders. I've seen in the past 5 years more of my fellow female agency leaders at their kids' games, posting concerts. And sometimes these concerts, as you know, are in the middle of the day, which is the most inconvenient time for working parents. But I've seen more of that. I've seen more flexibility. And that's another thing that's important to me at Bond and Matter is that, we do have, as you may have seen on LinkedIn, the vast majority of the people at our company are women, young women. And I think that they're watching by example. They are seeing that, I've taken time out to go be a class mom for my daughter's gifted and talented class, which requires sometimes throwing a party in the middle of the day for the kids. They've seen me go to her 5th grade talent show, which was at 1 p.m. They've seen kind of those things, and they understand that work can sometimes get done outside of those hours, and that's okay. And if I can do it as the leader of the company, then they can do it. I think one of the most, and they can advocate for themselves in a way that maybe I couldn't 12 or 15 years ago. Like that didn't seem possible. One of the most gratifying parts of my career has been to see over the past 6 years, some of the women and men on my team get married, have babies, have baby number 2, even baby number 3, and be able to make that balance from being sort of a single person to a married person to a mom happen and still continue to operate at a very high level and still continue to get promoted into leadership positions. And being able to kind of foster that for these people is one of the most important things that I've learned over the past 6 years is like, how can I be a good mentor and leader to show them the path that you can be a mom and you can be there to see the first steps and to not miss out on some of the things that I missed out on while still operating at a super high level at work.
What's next for you and for Bond and Matter?
I think the answer is to continue doing just this. As long as we have our stable set of clients that is hopefully growing, but that we continue to do great work and have great fun and do great things for the community. I think that that's all that I and my business partner could ever ask for. That's the American dream for us, I think, is, essentially to come from very little to create a lot and to make sure that other people and that we mentor and that work for us can also have a lot. I think in the most simplest terms, I'm a writer, but in the simplest terms, that's kind of what we want and what we hope for. I wrote this in the MedAd News kind of profile, right? There's no aspiration to say by this date, we need to have X million in revenue or X number of people because we're privately held. And so that information is, only as good as what we want it to be. And as long as I think we can continue to do really excellent work that we can be proud of and to mentor excellent people whom we are very proud of, then we're doing our jobs.
This is the choose your own adventure part of the proceedings. Is there a question you'd like to ask yourself?
I think the question I'd like to ask myself is, most importantly, I mean, as a female founder, a mom, a sister, a daughter, all of these things, what do I want to, like, what do I hope for the young women of the future, like my daughter? And I think that the answer is that it's complicated because I think it took me a long time to get to where I am, both mentally and kind of like in the success in the agency world. What I would love to see for them is that they continue to the confidence that they have at 10 or 11 or 12, that they can really do anything, that there's, no one has ever told them. And at this age, I'm going to use my daughter as an example. No one's ever told her she can't do this or that, or she needs to be pigeonholed into this or that, or it's going to be difficult to be a leader or a doctor and a mother. I think I would take that. My wish for these younger girls and women is that they take that into the future and that they really abide by it and believe it. I think that sometimes, the pressure of the working world and conforming to what you think society expects out of you, which is pretty common for young women, it can be oppressive and that can kind of, sometimes crush your dreams and potential. But my hope is that this younger generation can see possibilities that we didn't always see were open to us, and that it won't take people like my daughter to have that sort of stroke of crazy that struck me 6 years ago, and that she'll be able to see possibilities, I think, naturally without saying, without having those experiences that would lead her to say, I'm done with this, I need to quit and create something brand new, that those avenues will be open to her without necessarily having to do that, having to forge them herself. However, if she does want to, then I'll take credit for being that role model.
Thank you so much, Deb. Really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me.
I just wanted to also thank MedAd News for the opportunity. I'm really humbled and honored to be here, and I thought it was a great conversation.